Hello, and welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about the LoL preseason. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the audience about what this podcast is about?
Well, I'd say it's pretty simple. We tend to talk about games. This week, though, I do have a lot of stuff on my mind because, first of all, I've been playing ridiculous amounts of games, as I just realized by looking at my Steam profile. And also, I've just been thinking a lot about the past couple of weeks, and most of our loyal listeners will know that I'm probably talking about Fallout 4, but I just have to like get this off my chest, right?
All right, buddy. So tell me about your week.
Oh God. Okay. So I've been listening to this is gonna be really roundabout, so you're just gonna have to bear with me here. All right. I've been listening to a new podcast recently. And it's this podcast on wolfpop.com. It's hosted by Devin Faraci and Amy Nicholson, who are two very well-known, film critics on like the blogosphere and Twitter and everything like that. And this podcast is called The Canon. And basically what they do is, each week somebody will nominate, they'll get it from forums or from people on Twitter or whatever. They'll nominate a film for, induction into the canon, and then they'll kind of argue about why or why not it should be a part of the canon of, like, great films, right? That these are films that people should watch, that film people, like, film buffs should go back and watch and stuff. And, they do all kinds of stuff, right? I mean, that sounds really pretentious, and they can get pretty pretentious, obviously. But they have Clerks and Blade Runner and, these kind of like cult classics and stuff that are in there. And so I've been thinking in those terms a lot. And I was thinking a lot about Fallout 4, and I was trying to, kind of like put together almost because, we're coming up on the end of the year, and I'm thinking a lot about, the games that I've played this year and what my top 10 would look like, my top 5 would look like, what's my game of the year, and I was just kind of thinking, where does Fallout 4 come down in all of this stuff, right? Is this a great game? 10 years from now, are we going to still be thinking about Fallout 4 and talking about Fallout 4? Am I going to load up Fallout 4 on Steam and replay it, the way that I've replayed, kind of all these other games that I think of as, my personal games canon. And the kind of verdict I came down was like, no, right? And I think that this is the tragedy of Fallout 4 for me. Because, we did our very first episode, right, was our hyped episode. Like, what are the games that we're most looking forward to? And Fallout 4 was my number fucking one, right? But, now that I go back and I think about it and I'm thinking about this game, we took, last week, obviously, with Thanksgiving. No, wait, maybe it was the week before. Whatever. We took Thanksgiving. I didn't play for a couple of days, and it was just kind of seething in my mind, like gnawing at me. And I just kind of began to realize that, maybe Bethesda, I don't know, maybe they've peaked or something. Because I think Skyrim is the better game that Bethesda has made in their entire career, right? Like, Skyrim is better than Fallout 4 to me. And then I was like, well, maybe, maybe it's the best Fallout game, right? I think the original Fallout and Fallout 2 are obviously super, super heavy influential stuff, right? And I've played enough of them. I've never actually beaten the games, but I've played enough of the games to kind of get why they were so crazy for the time and everything. But I also don't think it's better than Fallout New Vegas. So it's not even the best Fallout game. And I was just sitting there like, overwhelmed. It's just like melancholy and disappointment. Should be the name of today's episode. Melancholy and disappointment.
Maybe for you.
Yeah. Because, I am, according to my, my Steam profile, I am 107 hours deep into Fallout 4, and I don't really like this game that much. Anyway, I was, actually, before I go off on this tangent that is related to Fallout 4, I swear, just bear with me for a second. I think we have to introduce a quick new segment to some derps talk about games. I'm going to need everybody to go out and get your monocles, guys. And get a little glass, fill it with some brandy, sit in a high-backed leather chair. It's time to go into Buddy's Pretentious Corner, where I talk about pretentious things. I don't know why this popped into my head just now. It's probably because we're talking about film criticism. But, like, however many years ago, there was a big deal because Roger Ebert came out in a blog post and he said that he doesn't think that games can be art, and everybody got real bent out of shape about it. If you actually read past kind of the headline, right, like that clickbait headline that he was getting at, basically his theory is that art is something that's 100% created by an artist, right? But because a piece of every game is fundamentally created by the player, the muddying of that 100%, right, that percentage is what kind of disqualifies it from being, I think he used the term high art in this context. And, I don't think he was intending to be condescending. He came out in later blog posts and just kind of explained that he thinks that it's different but not necessarily worse. It's not a quality judgment. It's just it's a defining thing, right? Like how we define art kind of thing. And I think that sentiment plays into how I feel about this. Because I feel like compared to past Fallout games, compared to past Bethesda games, I'm doing far less creating of my own kind of narrative and my own kind of world, which is really ironic when you think about it, because I'm sure you're going to say, well, buddy, you can create settlements and you can do all this other stuff, but I just kind of feel like I'm being railroaded a lot more in Fallout 4, and that's pun intended, I suppose, and that's a problem with the game that I haven't quite figured out how to grapple with yet. I don't know. I don't know. I really like Bethesda when it comes to DLC. I think DLC could be a big saving grace for this game, which could kind of take it into the stratosphere, and maybe I could see myself come back to it. But man, I mean, just looking at my Steam stuff now that I'm going through and looking at all of these games that I've played in my lifetime or whatever. I have about the same amount of time on my PC version of Skyrim. I probably have another, 100 or 200 hours of it played on the Xbox 360 because, of course, I bought it on both, kind of consoles, I suppose. And I don't know that I'm ever going to do that for Fallout 4. Like, I don't know that I'm going to come back to Fallout 4 ever just because of this feeling. This is so depressing. I'm sorry. Now that my rant is over, pretend we're done with our pretension, I guess.
Yeah, I've obviously heard your complaints, well as the dialogue system and the story and whatnot. And I personally feel like you have this tendency to kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater, as it were. I think you get way too hung up on like these things that are ultimately secondary. And like I don't know, I really enjoy Fallout. I don't have as many hours as you do.
That is an interesting kind of parallel almost, because I wouldn't say that that's secondary. I would say that it's less throwing the baby out with the bathwater and more like Fallout 4 is a house, right? And it's built on all of these like big foundations, right? And like gunplay is a foundation and the RPG stuff is a foundation and whatever. And I feel like the foundation that is the dialogue system is so rotten and broken that it just can't support the house. And so like kind of the whole house has collapsed for me in my mind. I don't know, because the other thing is I see how this dialogue system has bled into kind of everything else to fuck with it almost, right? Like I almost feel like there's no part of the game that wasn't touched by this like festering rot of the dialogue system's corruption, if I wanted to be poetic about it.
I think this might also talk to our different types of playstyles, because, like, I definitely see what you're saying. I definitely see the problems with the dialogue system, and again, as listeners for previous episodes said, I do appreciate the attempt to do something different, but I do hope that they learn the lesson that voice acting is not more important than choice, ultimately, in these types of games, or in their games, which is, kind of why we play them. But I also think that part of it is that, like, the way I always played these games was kind of like, I do the main story for long enough to get whatever amount into the game I needed to really get, like, all the features kind of rolling. Like, open Oblivion gates in Oblivion, get my first couple shouts, get the Foots of the Row and the Da in Skyrim. I don't really feel like there's much of that point in this game. It's maybe getting Preston Garvey and the Minutemen back to Sanctuary. That's probably it. So you unlock the settlement stuff.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And then I kind of wandered off in a direction and never went back to the main story. Just kind of explored the world, and I love that. And in a weird way, the story of this game is the only story in any Bethesda game I've played that has made me play past like those first 4 missions. And for me, like when I kind of got tired of the deficits in the story, I just kind of wandered off and started doing my own thing again. And that's kind of what I love about and you know, I'm still fulfilled by that, right? Like, you know, maybe you could say there aren't as many great side quests, but there are a ton of great little things in the world that I love, right? Like I went through the Silver Shrouds quest line backwards. Like I found the comic shop, I went into it. I love this kind of little world of the Silver Shroud that was there. And listening to all the different like the argument between the producer and whatever on the terminals, and picking up all the stuff and being like, wow, now I've got the Silver Shroud's outfit type of deal. Mm-hmm. All of that kind of like little stuff. There's a couple things with Raiders that are kind of like that. There's like for part of the Railroad quest, you have to go. I think it's the Randolph Safe House, but like the Randolph Safe House just kind of like kills some sense in here. But then you read some of the terminals, and it's like this weird subplot about a professor at CIT, and the dean getting all up in his business and arguing with him and telling him, "Why are you in the bank for so long with one of your female graduate students?"
Oh, you know, that's actually kind of funny. See, now that you're saying this is the stuff I actually really enjoy. I did the same thing, but I didn't do it as part of a railroad thing. I just walked into that settlement one day, and I read through those. I read through that stuff on the terminals. But I remember the same story that you're kind of addressing.
Did you find out? Did you find the conclusion?
I found yes, because it's the entrance in the bank, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't actually go in there. I didn't do anything in there or whatever, but I remember, because I think by that time I was just so overflowed with junk. Yeah, I mean, just
to kind of close out my thoughts on
sure.
that particular experience, right? Like, I read all this stuff about, like, this conflict between the professor and the dean, and, like, I kind of wandered around, like, oh, where's the admin building? Oh, that's the bank. Let me look into it. I went down, and then, like, this is also the second bank I had found that day. I found the bank in Boston, which is, not really a story point, but, like, you open this giant vault, and there's just, like, 7,000 vault boxes to pick. It's just kind of like, this is, like, money is mine. I have, like, 300 stacks of pre-war money. But then, like, I go into this vault, and, like, I open, like, I just happened, the button that opens up the lab is the last one I did. It's like, huh, that's funny. Wait, the door swung open. There's a button. It's just kind of like, and then pressing that button, everything kind of clicked and fell into place as to, like, what all the, like, I hadn't seen that whole, like, oh, why are they in the bank together for so long? It's like, oh, is there something, and, the thing about her birthday, it's just like, oh, and just, that kind of thing felt good to me, right?
Yeah, and I definitely think that is the game kind of, like, working at its hardest, and doing its best. But, like, there's so much other that, and this is what really fuels this kind of, like, degrading ambivalence that I feel, right? Which is because, like, I love that stuff. And I do think that stuff is very good and that's very core to kind of the experience. But then I also, like, these... We talked about this before, but these Radiant quests, like these procedurally generated Radiant quests, bothered me so much more in Fallout 4 than they ever did in Skyrim, or even in Fallout 3, where they both were, right? Like, both of those, it wasn't called Radiant quests in Fallout 3, but you did have more or less randomized stuff that kind of popped up or whatever. And the Radiant quests in Skyrim always feel good to me, because... I think at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to the grindiness of it. And maybe this is, somebody might get on my case, maybe I'm playing the game wrong, quote unquote, but I feel like the game really wants me to play this way almost, where I was maxing out all of my companions' affinity towards me or whatever. But that just kind of meant that I kept grinding the most efficient quests over and over again, right? Like, obviously, Preston Garvey's, like, dick gets really fucking hard when you're helping out these settlements, and so you just grind these Minuteman settlement helping quests, which are all just procedurally generated. Oh, some raiders! Oh, some super mutants! Oh, some raiders! Oh, some super mutants! There was one time where I actually hit the same procedurally generated quest twice in a row. I went to a settlement, I cleared out some raiders in a place, I went back to the castle, and it gave me the exact same quest to go back to the settlement and clear out the exact same little dungeon full of raiders, and I was just like, what the fuck am I doing with my life, right? Like, this isn't the Fallout that I love, and part of me, part of that's on me, right? Obviously, you choose a lot of what you do in Fallout, but the game incentivizes this because it's the most efficient way for you to get your companions maxed out, and getting your companions maxed out, which by the way is apparently supposed to be the replacement of the karma system. Getting your companions maxed out gives you very real, tangible gameplay benefits because you're getting these perks from it.
Did Todd Howard say that the companions are supposed to replace the karma system? Or like somebody from their team, Todd Howard.
Yeah, it was a quote. So I read in somebody's review of Fallout 4, they talked about it. Maybe it's just that person. I don't remember specifically enough, but it did sound like that was more definitive than that.
See, so just to kind of speak to those kind of points directly, I think there is some blame to be put on Bethesda for like kind of like leading you that way, right? Like kind of like being like, oh well. There's a thing. I think part of the bigger thing is that the Radiant quests in Oblivion never felt as like authoritative as they do in this game, right? Like when some random dude's like, the Draugr are Draugering, you should stop them from Draugering, which is my own veiled criticism of Skyrim. It's kind of like it's like, oh, that's nice, and maybe if you get around to it, you can do that. Whereas in Fallout, it's kind of like, well, Preston Gravy said that you need to go help this town, and that's an important thing because Preston Gravy told you to do it. And it's got this big marker in your quest log, and you should go handle that. And I think that's a lot of what kind of makes that the system feel worse. Like, I don't think the quality of the quest is actually that much worse. I think part of it is that like it feels much more important to the game that you do those quests, even though they're really not. Like, you could safely ignore them.
Something that really bugs me, and this is like the most nitpicky thing, but it's a big deal, I promise. Something that really bugs me is these quests all show up in your main quest log, right?
Yes.
They have that miscellaneous
that's
tab.
part of what I'm getting
And in
at.
Skyrim, all of that miscellaneous shit was filed under miscellaneous, where it belonged, right? Like, it didn't, I wasn't confronted with this procedurally generated thing every time I kind of looked at it, right? I don't know. I think that I know it sounds really stupid, but I think that makes a big difference.
No, I agree entirely.
And
that's exactly my point.
Another thing that really makes these the Skyrim Radiant quests feel better is like it. They always feel like they're kind of emphasizing little niche mechanics, which always felt great, right? Like, so I will always do the Radiant quest that you get where like the courier shows up and it's like, hey, somebody has this note for you. They didn't tell me who from, right? And then you look at the note, and it's like, there's a fucking you did some nice shouting there. There's something related to that shouting in this dungeon, right? And at the bottom of the dungeon, there's going to be a word of power for, like a new shout to discover as a Dragonborn. I love those quests. I do those quests constantly because to me, the gameplay reward of learning a new shout is a big fucking deal, right? And that's something that I'm always excited for, and I'm always motivated to kind of do, right? But I was never really motivated or excited to, I was motivated and excited to open up new settlements, but I was never motivated or excited to just help out in nebulous ways the settlements that I already had, right? They don't give me any rewards. It's not like I get supplies for that. It's not like I get, new settlers or special settlers or anything like that. I just get caps and experience, which is what I get from every fucking other thing in this game.
You know what I think part of it is that like in a very similar sense, right? Like the words of power were always kind of a thing that like were always at the bottom of the dungeon, and that's the way you got them. And I think the equivalent is supposed to be the legendary weapons in this game. And the issue there is that those legendary weapons you could kind of find anywhere, right?
Yeah,
like you don't have to go to a dungeon to find
true.
them. And even though they're randomized in Skyrim, like the fact that you have to go to the bottom of the dungeon to find them. And this is going to sound weird because I've been thinking about this particular quirk a lot, but I think a really big missed opportunity maybe is that like you'll get these random legendary raiders that'll drop good items, but then like the big, like even if they're not even that much more powerful, like at the end of every like raider camp there's a named raider, right? Like Big Tom or like Silly Sally or whatever the hell they're named.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they never have anything interesting on them. They're just like a corpse with a name and like 40 bullets on them. And I think there was a really big missed opportunity to kind of put, like, even if it's just a randomized epic weapon, just kind of that guarantee there. So, at least I know at minimum when I go into, like, one of these random Radiant things, I'm getting something out of it, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right answer, but that's, I think, a better answer than, like, nothing.
I also think, and this is, I've been thinking a lot about the combat between Skyrim and Fallout 4, because if there's anything that I'm gonna give Fallout 4 credit for, right, it really does get its combat right, and I think that you can't really shake. That's the strongest pillar that this kind of collapsed house is built on. But even then, I was kind of thinking about it, and I feel like Skyrim. It doesn't necessarily do it better, but it almost does it just as well, in my opinion. Because in Skyrim, I was kind of struck by something when I was thinking about high-level enemies, right? And there are some enemies in Fallout 4 that behave differently than others, but generally speaking, everyone in one enemy type is going to behave almost exactly the same, right? You've got a couple of, like a super mutant suicider behaves a lot differently than a regular super mutant, but what's the real difference between a super mutant skirmisher, a super mutant brute, you know what I mean? I can think, and I was just thinking about it when it came to Skyrim, right? You had, Draugr Deathlords, were just such a different thing. And the Draugr, even the mundane Draugr, right? Like, some of them just ran up to you and shot you with, like, arrows, and some of them ran up to you and hit you with swords. Some of them used magic on you, which, I think that stuff is great. And I really do think that there was a lot, more kind of tactical variety, almost. Where maybe the minute-to-minute wasn't as good, right? Obviously, I don't think anybody's really going to stick up for it and say, like, melee combat in Skyrim was super good, right? Like, I don't think that that system was not great in comparison to other games like, Dragon Age or whatever. But I do think that the enemies were kind of unique, and I never really feel like... I don't know. I for some reason, I get this kind of feeling in Fallout that everything feels the same, though, I mean, now that I kind of say that out loud, I'm pretty sure that's just because when you're playing a sniper build in Fallout, which is the most overpowered way to play the game, you're carrying a big, silenced, scoped hammer, and everything just looks like I die in one-shot nail, like...
You mean, like, stealth archery in Oblivion and Skyrim?
Stealth archery never was that good, though. Like, I agree that stealth archery has the same kind of gameplay, but I think it's a lot easier to miss with with arrows because A, the arrows are projectiles, and B, they have arcs, right? So, like, if you're really far away, you have to kind of arc it correctly, and they never did that much damage, right? Like, I couldn't stealth archer down a Draugr Deathlord in one shot, right? But I've killed plenty of super mutant masters just by headshotting them, with my silenced gauze rifle in Fallout 4. Something I was thinking about was, the modding system, and I was like, okay, if there's anything I'm really going to give Fallout 4 a lot of credit for, that modding system is fucking great. But then I actually started thinking about that too, and I was like, well, Fallout New Vegas had a very similar modding system, even though the user interface wasn't as good, and it wasn't as... it wasn't as comprehensive for each individual gun, but there were way more guns in Fallout New Vegas, and the guns had a very natural progression, and the mods, there were less mods per gun, but they were a big kind of meaningful, powerful upgrade kind of a thing. And in Skyrim you have enchanting, which is it's just magic modding, right?
I don't think that that's as fair. Like, the enchanting system was never as kind of specialized to to things as the modding system is. Like, I feel like the modding system is a little bit more flexible.
I don't know that I agree with that. Well, so first off, I think enchanting plus smithing is really where you get a good combination, right? Because obviously a big part of modding is I level up my gun nut perk to whatever, and I take my 10 damage, assault rifle and make it a 26 damage assault rifle. That's the same progression, as far as I'm concerned, between upgrading my elven longsword to an ebony broadsword or whatever. But then, the specific mods that kind of change stuff. I mean, honestly, now that I kind of voice this, a better way to think about it is the enchanting system are a lot like these affixes, right? But it's not random. I can control that, and I think that that's better in a certain sense.
I think the enchants were never as powerful as the affixes, though. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I don't think they were as powerful as either.
And
I don't know.
I think part of this disparity in variety is like, there's 3 legs in Skyrim. There's range, there's melee, and there's magic. And there's only 2 legs in Fallout. There's melee and there's ranged.
That's true. I haven't done a melee build. I think Fallout suffers a little bit too from kind of the homogenization of certain classes of weapons. Something I really enjoyed about Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas was that energy weapons and small weapons, or like small guns or whatever, were 2 different skills, and I kind of wish that variety was still there, because I liked the idea that first of all, laser rifles in Fallout 3 are very fast. They're super quick, but they're low damage. They're super quick, high accuracy, low damage, right? And then you have plasma weapons, which are very slow. They actually fire an actual projectile rather than having it be hit scan, which is basically what every other gun in that game is. It fires an actual projectile. It's very slow. It's very inaccurate, but it does, a heaping helping of damage. And I really love that interaction because it keeps both plasma weapons and laser weapons kind of relevant all the way through the game. Because even though, at the highest levels of Fallout 3 and New Vegas, the plasma weapons are going to just out DPS the laser weapons, kind of for obvious reasons. They're really competitive for a long time, but something that kind of bugged me is not only is my plasma rifle just fundamentally better than my laser rifle, it's also better than my combat rifle. It's also better than my hunting rifle, because they've kind of smushed all of these.
There's a weird tiering progression that's not great.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of my my closing thesis on Fallout. I tell myself that I want to go back and I want to close out the story. I really want to get into. Maybe it can save itself by getting deeper into this faction stuff, but I don't think. I mean, I've been through 2 of the 3 factions, or 3 of the 4 if you count the Minutemen, for Railroad and Brotherhood of Steel, and they're so hamstringed by the dialogue system. I find it so hard to get a good grasp on who these people are, because I can't just talk to somebody and keep asking for more information, which is something that I always felt like I could do in other games. So I'm sorry, loyal listeners.
Yeah, I definitely feel those criticisms. Obviously, they mean more to you than they do to me, because I still think the game is amazing. I don't think it's the best story ever, or I don't think the story system is the best ever. Obviously, I think there's problems with dialogue as well, but I think it's the best game mechanically we've gotten out of Bethesda, and that, I think, in many ways matters more to me. I think as dear listeners, as you listen to the podcast, this will become a recurring theme. I'll be like, the mechanics, and Buddy will be like, but the story, though.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where, I definitely think the mechanic. I mean, I'm sure we'll have a how do we define games episode where this will all become much, much clearer, because I have some wacky.
I'm sure it'll become much clearer, and it won't be devolved into a shouting match.
Yeah. But I think that I do think that the mechanics. If you were to gun to my head, are the mechanics in the combat mechanics in Skyrim better, or the combat mechanics in Fallout better? Yes, Fallout mechanics are incrementally better, right?
I don't think they're okay. So that's.
So
I think they're I think they're more than incrementally, but that's like
interesting. So I think that they're incrementally better. Maybe if we were to go by percentage points, because I kind of like quantifying stuff just to give you an idea. It's maybe 10 or 15 percentage points higher from a combat setting, but the story and stuff is down like 50. You know what I mean? And so there's a huge deficit to kind of be made up.
See, I feel like the combat's at least almost. Yeah, no, I get that, but I feel like the combat system's at least 50% better. I don't know if I can put a number on the dialogue system, but I think that.
This is actually kind of an interesting question because you're more of an I don't really like FPSs. I've played a bunch of them, and I understand obviously good gunplay, and I get that the gunplay in Fallout 4 is so much better. But was the gunplay in Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 3, was it that offensive to your FPS nerves?
So New Vegas I can't really talk about because I played a punch build, but definitely Fallout 3 felt very clunky. Like, it just didn't feel like I was. It didn't feel good, and that was kind of acceptable because VATS was the main way I kind of played that game. But without that, I would have hated it. It felt bad. I don't know if I can really quantify it this far. Like, I don't know if I can. I haven't played it in a long time, and I don't know if I can quantify it this far out exactly what made it feel bad. I just get the distinct feeling that it was like, this is not great. This is.
I think it's similar to Payday 2, which is probably the FPS I've spent the most, grand total of time with. But we've talked about this before, where you weren't a big fan of the gunplay in Payday 2, and I get that because I remember I think with Payday 2 and similarly with Fallout 3, the gunplay starts bad and gets good as you level up. You know what I mean? Like, it gets more precise, it feels better, you're less destroyed by things like recoil and just like accuracy problems. In Payday this gets factored out because you're leveling up in your build and you're getting better. You get weapon stability and stuff by putting skill points and stuff. But the big thing is mods, obviously, right? Like, an unmodded rifle feels a lot worse, a lot less precise and good and responsive than a fully modded M308 or whatever rifle you're using. And I think that progression is important to those games because they're RPG-ish or whatever. But I definitely think that it suffers for that reason.
Yeah. Just kind of like this thought's been bubbling to the top of my head for something I wanted to, like, this kind of closing thought on like little things that I think people overlook with Fallout 4 is like, even there are some mechanical enhancements in places that you don't really think about, but like, I think hacking as a skill is much better in Fallout 4, right? Like, the mini game is exactly the same. It's not that aspect of it, but like in Fallout 3, hacking was just like another way to open a particular safe or something, right? Or like the way to turn off the turrets or whatever. In this game, there's a lot more places where it feels like hacking is there's a reason to have both hacking and lockpicking. Whereas in Fallout 3, it felt like you could really get away with just doing one. But like, I think there's a lot of little what I would call incremental improvements in the mechanics that, for me at least, make Fallout 4 like very good feeling mechanically, and that's part of why I still love the game.
Interesting. All right, we've rambled enough. We've added another 30 minutes to our, this is our epic, our magnum opus.
Oh, yeah, right.
Fallout 4. But another game I played this week was Total War Attila, which has been good and bad because I love these games, and this one's really good, and I've put 30 hours in it inside of 6 days, which is probably speaks to my habits, but it's made me kind of hyper aware of how unfair I was to Total War Warhammer, because in that hype episode, it didn't even make my list. But now that now that I've been playing Total War Attila, and now that I went back and I was like, all right, let's fucking look up this shit because I really want to know. Like, now I really want to know the stuff that the Creative Assembly has been coming out with for Warhammer. Looks pretty fucking great. I don't know. Have you seen any of like the new trailers and everything that they've been
none of the super
dealing
new
with?
Stuff I have not, but I was hyped for it a while ago. So
man, They just released. It's the first video I ever saw where they kind of talk about the campaign map, and they're just going through, the campaign map for the greenskins, and it's just, First of all, something that really bugs me is, in Total War, you have this thing called integrity, right? And it's not really built for most factions, but it's very, very integral for the Romans, because I guess the Roman armies don't have good integrity or something. It deteriorates as you do shit like completely destroy and raise settlements, which, by the way, is a great addition. I'm really happy that they added that to the game, because it adds a lot of strategic options to how you deal with cities. But, this denigrates your integrity, and when your integrity gets really low, your generals, that army will mutiny against you, right? And this general will run around fucking up your shit. And there's a similar mechanic in Total Warhammer called Fightin' Spirit for the greenskins, but I'm pretty sure it's spelled it's like
Fightan.
Like fighting,
or Fitan or something like that.
If they get it by raiding, they get it by just fighting battles, right? And when it gets really low, you get all these negatives. Your guys are super lazy and shit. But when it gets really high, you can activate a WOG, and the way I've always heard it was a WOG, but the guy kept saying WA, which I was like, what?
I've always heard it as WA.
Really? I've always heard it as WOG, dude. I don't know. I guess just different Warhammer circles are different. But,
yeah. But yeah, that's when Waluigi comes out and leads your army, right?
What you do is you activate a second army that's just random, right? Like just a random army full of random units, and they just follow you around and they fuck shit up, but you don't control them, right? They just follow you around and fuck shit up with you. And I was like, what a great mechanic for greenskins, right? It's so perfectly greenskins that, there's this random group of raiders who just follow in your footsteps and fight with you, but you don't control them. They just do what the fuck they want. It was so perfect.
I think the kind of, the story justification behind it is kind of like, as you build up this kind of like fighting energy, it kind of permeates like the environment, and like the orcs that are just kind of like all fucking around because not all of the orcs are part of they're like, oh, there's fighting happening. Let's get in on that. It's that sounds like super perfect. I'm excited.
And the coolest part of this video is they show an auto-resolve battle, right? Where somebody goes, they fight a dwarven settlement, they auto-resolve the battle, and the settlement itself changes. But it's not like it changes where they demolish all of the dwarven shit and rebuild it with goblin shit. They just like haphazardly put goblin shit everywhere. So like you can still see these like dwarven faces and everything underneath, but they're just like covered in these like really shitty like wooden goblin faces, because what are they? They're not going to tear down. They're just going to put their own shit on. And it looks so good, and it's aesthetically everything that I fucking want. And it's like all of these fears that I had about the game not being what I was looking for, like the vampire counts, they're not really a big faction. I'm not going to get my wood elves, which are my favorite Warhammer Fantasy faction. The what I think of as these big factions, like Bretonia's not in there. The high elves aren't in there. Like all this other stuff. They're really selling me when it comes to the greenskins, and these other, I don't know. I'm super into it, and it's 4 months away, so there's that.
Yep.
Anyway, we've talked about my week for 45 minutes. How was your week? What have you been playing?
Mine's gonna be much shorter, just because I didn't play as many games this week. I've just been busy with a variety of things. And so what I did do this week is I play a little bit of Xenoblade Chronicles X, which I haven't dug deep into, but I'm really liking it. The combat, like I usually don't like JRPGs because I find the combat to be stilted or whatever, but the combat's just kind of hectic enough. Like there's enough kind of mechanics that aren't mastered yet for me that just like I'm really into it, right? Like it's like, occasionally these prompts show up that you have to time right with a B press. It's like, oh no, and it's like, oh no, like somebody shouted something and like it's got a color on it, and if you use an ability with that right color, you get a bonus. Like, I gotta press the buttons right, and it's still like masterable enough for me that that I'm excited about. It. But I haven't really dug deep into it, so I can't really talk in depth about it. On the positive side, we did it. And by we, I mean probably just me, because Indivisible got funded. Indivisible got funded before the pod.
Sorry, I did not fund Indivisible.
And when I and even if I meant we in terms of the listenership, it was funded before the episode where I told everybody to go fund it went up. I mean, it was weird because it was at like 1.3 million when we recorded. And then it jumped by $400,000 in like the last couple days, and that happens for these Kickstarters and things. But it's funded, so it's going to come out. I'm super excited. I'm ready for. I think it's an awesome game. I think you guys should all go check out the demo. And what else? The only other thing I really wanted to bring up was this weekend I ran the last part of the first book of Wrath of the Righteous, where everybody this is Pathfinder, this is not video games, and all my players kind of have this big crowning moment of glory where they kick some demon ass and they become mythic. And one of my players, we hit level 4 right before the session started, was like, one of my spells I'm going to take is a spell called Blistering Invective, and that's a spell where you shout. You make an intimidate check, and if you succeed, they all light on fire. And so that's like one of the greatest spells that I never knew about. So I want to give a shout out to Blistering Invective, and to Chris, the half-orc Inquisitor of Caden Kaladin, who. It's just a great session.
I like the idea of Caden Kaladin having Inquisitors.
Yes.
It's like, what do they do? It's like, hey, you're not having enough fun. Gotta have more fun, right? Like, Caden Kaladin is not a half orc, is a Pathfinder deity that none of my characters would ever follow, because it's well documented how little I enjoy fun.
Yes. But yeah, that's the vast majority of my week. And so, I'll make up for your 40 minutes with approximately 4 minutes of content.
Oof, we're super good at this. Okay.
So let's move on to the topic at hand, which is
League.
The League of Legends preseason. Wow.
We've been playing on the preseason for a couple of weeks now. We were thinking about doing this one a lot earlier, but I think it's actually, man, when it comes to Riot, I think I can make a lot of kind of predictions about certain changes that get made in certain games, and right, like, you can show me this system of WoGs in Warhammer, and I could say this is a great system, or you could show me, this this system in the Guild Wars 2 expansion. I say, I'm not really feeling the system or whatever. But League of Legends, I always kind of feel like is almost a crapshoot, right? Stuff the community gets super bent out of shape on, stuff that I think are bad choices or whatever. They're just brilliant. Sometimes they're just like fucking great, and then some things I look and I'm like, oh, this is so cool, this is so awesome, and they just end up falling flat on their faces. So I really thought it was important that we get some game, that I spent some time with these preseason changes, that I understood kind of where they went, what the meta looked like, and everything before I kind of like said my piece. But overall, I'm about, I am a little bit more than 50-50. I'm like 75-25 on the preseason changes. I think a lot of them are pretty good. I don't know. How do you feel?
Yeah. So I don't know if I'd put a number on like how much I approve and disapprove. Like to me, it's always kind of like it's this sea of change, and like how do things adapt to it. I will say that like one of my metrics for how successful a set of changes that Riot has made is how many of the things that they added in that are supposed to be new and neat are just kind of dead on arrival. And I think that set is thankfully kind of small here. In particular, I'm going to say that the only thing that I really feel that's really dead on arrival are the hybrid Sightstone items. I just don't feel like I'm just kind of using this as kind of like a launching off point into the new Vision stuff. Like, I was surprised, like kind of to your point. Sometimes I feel like what I think I'm going to feel about it doesn't end up being true. Like, I don't feel like I've missed the green wards as much as I thought I was going to. The purchasable green wards. And I do like the changes to the trinket. I do feel like I missed that last ward on the Sightstone, and I definitely feel like that there's never any reason to get the hybrid item on
Interesting. That is... I don't know that I agree with that. I like the hybridized items in theory. I think it's a tuning thing, right? Like, my big problem with the hybrid items is that they don't, and I get why that this is the case, but I feel like they don't carry enough stats to be worth it in a weird way. But even then, I actually prefer them for certain, like, I don't think that the Twin Shadows hybrid item is good. I would rather just hang out on a Frostfang, or if I need the slot, upgrade to whatever, like the Eye of Abyss or whatever the fuck it's called. Because I don't think the active is all that worth it, and I don't think the extra stats are really a big deal. Face of the Mountain has... I'm kind of so on Face of the Mountain, but the big one in my book that's not powerful enough, I will take the active every single time, is Talisman of Ascension. I think that active is just so fucking good. I can't believe the cooldown on it is so low. I remember when Shirelia's Reverie used to be in the game, and that item was super broken, kind of, sort of. I really feel like if anything in this support set of changes is really looking for a nerf, is really overtuned, it's that specific item. The movement speed is on too short of a cooldown, and it really should go... it really should go up.
Yeah, so just kind of get back to that to the point about the hybrid item. Like, and I agree with you on the speed thing. I don't mean to kind of discard that. I just don't think there's anything to really discuss there. I think that part of the issue with the hybrid items is that, like, even if I don't want to get the active yet, I don't think I ever need to pay for the hybrid item, right? Like, the thing that's supposed to trade out for is slot efficiency, and I rarely, if ever, have a need for slot efficiency on my supports. Like, the amount of times I have been like, oh darn, I could use another slot so I could build, like, what, like a Rabadon's Death Cap? Or, like, I just don't feel like that's almost ever the case.
I see where you're getting at. Yeah, that's actually interesting. I'm a big fan of slot efficiency on supports in general, because I'm a big fan of component items on supports. I do this very commonly on supports like Alistar, but more or less all of my supports, I tend to think along these lines somehow, but I think getting 40% CDR on most supports is very, very important. And I will sacrifice a lot to get there. Because as Alistar, the more I can knock people up, the more I can hit them back, the more I can throw out my heal, the more I can ultimate and be a tank for my team. All of these things are really important to me, and so I do things very commonly where I'll get a Glacial Shroud, I'll get, Sightstone, boots, generating, income item, and then I'll get, a Kindle Gem and a Glacial Shroud, and that gives me spot for pinks. You know what I mean? Like, so I have a lot less slots to work with on almost all of my supports, because even on supports like, who are the entire opposite of this, like Bard, right? I played a lot of support Bard. It's so important to me to get to that 40% CDR that I'm totally willing to build in inefficient paths in order to get there as quickly as possible.
See, I think though, even in that case you just described, though, you don't need the eye item, right? You still have space for most of what you need. Like, and I don't think that the gold you'd spend on combining the for the eye item is worth that's like I don't think you do, like, I don't think you do that to get the slot back. Like, even if you're missing a spot for like some extra potions, it's not worth, what is it, like how much is the combined cost for the items? Because I'm not sure. I just kind of.
It's a good amount of gold. I think I'll look it up real quick, just while you finish your point.
Yeah, well, the point kind of is that cost is always going to be more than whatever you want to, like, do I want to spend 500 gold to put like 100 gold worth of pots in that extra slot? And I don't think the answer is ever yes. And I also think that the bonus on the Ruby Sightstone, if I ever get to that point, is actually pretty good. Like, I play pretty active, heavy supports, and I love that extra 10% cooldown reduction if, like, we really get up there, right? Like, a Righteous Glory and a Face of the Mountain that's proccing 10% faster is worth a lot to me. Because I tend to play supports like, say, Tom Kench, where the cooldowns on the skills aren't necessarily as important, but like kind of having the utility on those items is a big part of my style, at least with those supports.
Okay, I feel that. I am looking. Excuse me. I'm looking right now at these. I'm looking right now at these items, and to be completely honest with you, I am a little bit surprised at what I'm reading because I don't know, maybe I'm just remembering incorrectly. That is obviously a possibility here. But actually, the base stats are pretty good compared to what I expected to see almost. So, for instance, Face of the Mountain, 450 health, 10%, or 100% rather, base health regen, 10% CDR, 2 gold per 10. Eye of the Equinox, the only thing you're lacking, stats-wise, you actually gain 50 health. It has 500 health. You get the same amount of regen, and you lack that 10% CDR. But otherwise, it's the exact same as Face of the Mountain. So it's literally just about the active. They cost the exact same amount of money. They cost the exact same amount of cash, both at 2,200 gold. And the combined cost is the exact same because you're trading out a Kindle Gem for a Sightstone in the case of Face of the Mountain. So the combined cost is 550 gold.
Right, but that 550 gold is purely going to slot efficiency, whereas you're buying an active, which I like Face of the Mountain's active, but I think that the active is much more valuable than the slot space. I guess your mileage may vary because of the way you build, but I just don't think that 550 gold's ever going to be worth it for just slot efficiency.
But then I look at, now I'm looking at Eye of the Oasis, which is the Talisman of Ascension version. It's actually straight up better, I think, because Talisman of Ascension, 100% base mana regen, 100% base health regen, 10% CDR. Eye of Oasis is 200 health, 150% mana and health regen. So you're missing the 10% CDR again, but you're actually gaining in the HP and you're gaining in the regen that you get from this item. Plus, the combined cost is 550 gold compared to Talisman of Ascension's 800, which obviously, they both cost the exact same amount after everything. But it's just,
but
I don't know. It's kind of interesting now that I look at the.
You're missing. But would you ever take that slot efficiency over the speed 'em up?
Probably not, but that's because the speed 'em up is overpowered. If the speed 'em up got nerfed back, if you nerfed the active down, maybe you nerfed it down to 30% movement speed, or only to 1 or 2 seconds rather than the full 3 seconds, or up the cooldown to 75 seconds. That's I don't know. That's something I could deal with. You know what I mean? Especially because Talisman of Ascension kind of fills the same purpose in a lot of cases as Righteous Glory, right? Like, I would not mind opening up another slot on my Alistar build so I can build a Righteous Glory by shoving my Sightstone and my Talisman into an Eye of the Oasis. You know what I mean? I don't know. I think these hybrid items are better than I gave them credit for almost, which is kind of crazy because I felt like they were a little bit worse they were worse in my brain because I know how people think about them, I guess.
Yeah, no, I guess that's true, but I don't know. I feel like at least in terms of the metagame, in terms of what people are actually playing with, I do think they are kind of dead on arrival though. Like, I don't think people, even if they are theoretically better than people give them credit for, I don't think anybody's actually using them that much.
Yeah, I think that's true as well. I definitely agree with you there. I think it gets also into a little bit wonky territory because a big problem I kind of feel about these items is because they build out of Sightstone, they all have health on them. And, they have a good amount of health, generally speaking, or whatever. But it's like, do I really need 200 health on Eye of the Watchers compared to Frost Queen Claim's 25 ability power? Like, is that really worth it for me in terms of stats and everything? It doesn't come with the only CDR that all of the other ones, they all come with 10% CDR. So, it's kind of, it's give or take. I'm a big fan of Eye of the Watchers just because of how I play the game generally, but I think the other two are less aggressive. And, I could see myself, I could see Riot buffing these up just a little bit, getting them into a more competitive slot slot kind of place.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, no, I definitely think they will, right? I think that's like kind of their objective. And obviously we've got a lot of preseason left to go.
A lot of preseason to go. All right, well, how about let's talk some big ticket. Or wait, are we
I just kind of had another kind of thing because it kind of follows into this vision game is like the trinket changes. Because I had a couple of opinions on this.
Right.
Just because they're kind of in the same kind of vein. I guess pun may be intended. There might be a pun there. But like, so in particular, I like the extra wards on the early yellow trinket. And I like the blue transformation. I think that's a good trade-off. I think there's good thought to be made there. I don't know how exactly I feel about the Oracle's alteration. One thing that I don't like is I feel like it makes True Sight a little too rare. And I think that the reason we haven't seen a spike really in kind of stealth champions, is because just kind of they're all mostly assassins, and they're kind of not in a great place right now. But I think that if those champions if the stealth champions get to a good place, I think we're gonna feel the fact that we don't have as many options for True Sight.
Interesting.
I could be. What are your thoughts on that? Because I could be off base.
I like the Oracle alteration, which there's basically two oracles right now. You have the sweeping lens, which sweeps an area, and you have the Oracle's alteration, which just kind of it's a PB AOE, a point blank AOE on you that follows you around, so you can kind of just like run around looking for wards. You don't have to kind of like smack it right in its face. My understanding is that I don't really get how they work, because they have this language that the lens is worn against unseen enemies, but it doesn't say it reveals them or anything like that.
I don't think it reveals them. I think it maybe gives you like an exclamation point or something.
Yeah, maybe that would make some sense. I think. I think stealth is always a very, very tough thing to balance in League of Legends. I remember back in the days of Jungle Twitch, where Twitch's stealth lasted 50 seconds. And it was where was he? And then all of a sudden he kind of pops out of nowhere. I'm still out to sea on that one. My mind ship hasn't come to dock with an opinion on it yet.
Okay, that's fair. I think part of, like
I do think the Farsight alteration is good, very good.
Yeah, I agree.
It's nice that it is just as useful as kind of the warding totem became. But I feel like I'm seeing a little bit too much of it almost.
Really? So I haven't had that experience. To my eye, it kind of feels like I think it's a meaningful choice. Like I don't think you always go Farsight. At least in my experience, you tell me if you felt different. But I thought it was it's a well.
The big problem with the Farsight alteration, as far as I see it, mostly because, so just for clarity's sake, I've played a lot of games kind of at the like the silverish level, but I've also been playing with some of my friends who are much better than that, and so we've been playing in this platinum level, like platinum and diamonds, right? I played a bunch of ranked 5s today, and we were playing against these diamond players, and we actually kind of ended up trashing them, which was crazy. But anyway, in the silver level, I it's kind of whatever. Most people just, maybe one or two people grab a Farsight alteration, but in this plat game, we'll have 3 people, 4 people, there won't even be a warding totem on the team because everybody's gone, Oracles or Farsight. And I think mostly it comes down to cooldown. Because the stealth wards don't last as long as they used to, they don't last 180 seconds. They only last at max rank 120. And it does take them very long to recharge. It takes them 180 seconds to recharge at a base cooldown, and then 120 at its very best. The Farsight alteration is a 48-second cooldown. And it places this ward, and this ward thing, dies in one hit, obviously, but it lasts kind of forever. And so it's very easy to get a lot of vision super safely as you kind of enter this late game where you can just kind of, we're pushing the bot lane turret. Well, we can put one ward in the Wraith Rush, one ward in, by their red bush, and then one ward right outside their base, and all of a sudden we have all of the vision that we need in order to not be flanked from the jungle. And that's very powerful, I think. And I'm kind of going to... I wonder if that's something that they're going to... If my read on its power is right, I suppose.
It might be, yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
The other thing is the Farsight Alteration. The more people who have Farsight Alteration, the less valuable your enemy oracles becomes, because you have less stealth wards just on the map.
That's very
passively.
True. Yeah.
You'll always have stealth wards because obviously somebody's, you're going to get the poacher's knife thing that drops stealth wards as a juggler, or you're going to get a sightstone, but I don't know. I don't know if the rock paper scissors is balanced in a perfect way yet.
I think that's fair. All right. Well, I think that's most of the stuff to talk about. Trinkets, let's move on to, as you put it, the big ticket items. What do you want to talk about?
Big ticket items, yeah. AD carry.
Yeah.
First, AD carry itemization changes, right? Because I have a thing on this, I really love these itemization changes, and I think that they're a great precedent for the game moving forward. And I really think, I do hope that we get some better item variety. I think League of Legends has always kind of been kind of a little bit on the anemic side in a certain sense when it comes to just the variety of items. There's a lot of kind of homogeneity in item builds and everything like that. But I think that in general, these AD carry item changes are super interesting because at first when I was kind of prepping myself to talk about this, I was thinking about it. I was like, well, what they did was, right, they took what it used to be way back in, this is really about Season 3, was there was a lot of variation in what your first item was. Your first item was either Infinity Edge, which wasn't great, Bloodthirster if you were kind of a caster, or Blade of the Ruin King, if you're somebody like Twitch or like Vayne, kind of these assassin-y AD carries. And that was kind of your identity, right? Your identity was defined by this first item you got. You're this Caitlyn type AD carry, a Lucian type AD carry, a Vayne type AD carry, right? And that kind of gave way to everyone bought Bloodthirster first, because Bloodthirster was just the way that you won lane hardest, so that became the default. And then they kind of swung the pendulum too hard in the other direction, where everybody bought Infinity Edge first, unless you were maybe Vayne, or like Vayne and Twitch were kind of the only two in the Trinity Force AD carries. I'm sorry, I'm leaving out that category. Who were, buying something besides Infinity Edge. But the vast majority were just buying these Infinity Edge things. And I was looking at that and I was like, oh, well, these changes make a lot of sense, because what they've done is they've looked at the attack speed items, which have historically only been Phantom Dancer or Static Shiv, right? And they said, well, let's add our variety here, right? Like, this is where your AD carry builds are going to really blossom, because certain people are going to be buying Farsight Cannon, Rapid Fire Cannon. Certain people are going to be buying Runeans, because Runeans can crit now. Zeal builds into 5 different things, and all of them have like a really unique kind of tactical niche. But that's just because I was underestimating the power of Essence Reaver so badly. Like, Essence Reaver is so good. I'm seeing a ton of Essence Reaver play in the game right now, and I think the kind of unsung thing that I haven't seen too many people do, but they probably might get in the habit of doing, is doubling up on Essence Reaver and Infinity Edge, because it's a really good starting, like, 2-item wombo combo for somebody like Graves or Lucian, who doesn't necessarily need the attack speed, but really benefits from that AD. It's kind of crazy. I think there's a lot of variation, a lot of variety at play. I'm a huge fan of these changes.
Oh no, I absolutely agree. I'm really enjoying, and to get into some of the items you didn't talk about, right? Like, I think that Death's Dance is a really cool item for kind of like making a tankier character. Like, the thing I've been playing a lot of lately, because I'm the type of guy who plays, is the Jungle Graves, and like,
because Mango enjoys giving all of us cancer constantly.
Right. Yep, all the time. You know what made me fucking amazed is that I also been playing a bunch of Alawi, the new champion, And she's a much harder jungle than Graves is. Like, Graves is super freaking easy to jungle with. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think I foresee a change in the future where his knockback only applies to minions and doesn't apply to jungle monsters. His clear is fucking ridiculous.
Amazing.
Like, oh my god.
Yeah, and so when I want to go for the option that's a little bit more tanky as a jungler rather than just pure damage as like an ADC, the Death's Dance actually gives me a lot of survivability. And I also think that the itemization changes, like Lord Dominic's Regards. I think that, like, I can feel, like, when I buy that item that, like, I start chunking through tanks better. I think that those two items are also doing their jobs very well.
Ironically, there's a lot of there's a couple other changes to. I think these changes are more assassin related, right? But there are a couple other changes that I think were pretty interesting. One of which was the change on Last Whisper to make it 1,000 gold cheaper, less. I'm pretty sure it's less AD overall, but the big change is that the armor penetration percentage only applies to bonus armor now. It no longer applies to
base armor.
It no longer applies to base armor, and I think that's a really interesting change because for a very, very long time, kind of the basic build has been for a lot of AD assassins, for a lot of AD carries, it's been Brutalizer, which has historically been an overpowered item, rather than you get this 1,300 gold Brutalizer, and then you get a 2,300 gold Last Whisper, right? So if I'm playing Talon, if I'm playing Zed, right, like Zed first item is going to be Blade of the Ruin King, second item is going to be Brutalizer, third item is going to be Last Whisper, right? And then I'll finish off the Youmu's after the fact, right? Well, nowadays, because the Last Whisper has swapped places almost with the Brutalizer, because now it gives the same amount of attack damage that it used to. It gives 25 attack damage at 1,300 gold with a 30% bonus armor penetration. And I think that early armor penetration is having a huge effect on how easy it is to deal with tanks. Because you can just kind of sit on your 1,300 Last Whisper and not worry all that much about it. You can upgrade into Lord Dominic's Regards in the late game, but it's not really, you don't need to in order to get a big ticket power item. And the jury's still out on whether or not that's overpowered, but I feel like it's really affecting the meta, because I've definitely had cases where, I was just doing absolutely nothing to this Malphite, so I just, bought a quick Last Whisper, and all of a sudden Malphite was just melting beneath me like all of these other squishy bitches.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that I think I agree with you. I think the jury's still out. I think they did a good job of making the items kind of situational. I think it's good that you don't always buy Last Whisper anymore, right? Like, it's not always the third item in your build like it was historically.
Yeah.
I think that's a good change. I think you might be right, though, that, like, it might be getting to a point where it might be a little bit too much, but I think, time will tell with that. That's all you can really...
What I like a lot about it, because it, stacks up, the base armor isn't effective, is I think it powers up base armor as a tuning statistic that they can use, right? Like, sure, like, if Mundo is just getting completely plowed through, all they need to do is lower his armor per level, or raise his armor per level, or, raise his base armor, and you can kind of solve a lot of problems, because you can always guarantee that Mundo is going to have that armor, which I think is a big deal. I don't know. I don't know. I'm kind of with it. I think Essence Reaver is probably... I think there's actually a hit on Essence Reaver coming in the next PvE patch, where instead of only 20% CDR, you're going to need 30% CDR in order to access... CDR. I meant crit. You're going to need 30% extra crit rather than 20% extra crit in order to get the extra 20% CDR that kind of comes baseline with the items in like an upgradable form, because I think they've probably been paying attention to people like me who build first item Essence Reaver, second item Trinity Force on Lucian, because Trinity Force now has 20% CDR, and I'm getting Trinity Force now has 20% crit, 24 says 20% crit, which gives me 20% CDR from Essence Reaver and an extra 10% CDR because Trinity Force comes with it. It's a very cheap, easy way to get to 40% CDR on Lucian, which is, that's obviously a really big statistic on him. I used to play CDR Lucian a lot back when it was not good at all. And so I think Essence Reaver's in for some pain. It's been a little too good. As far as the other items are concerned.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Let's talk about individual ADC changes.
Okay.
Let's start off with what I think is probably one of the worst ones out of the gate, and that's Corki.
Interesting. I think Corki. Well, okay. Hit me.
Oh, I think that they built a lot of his power budget into this drop. This 5-minute occurring thing, and I think that it's way too what's the word for this? It's like I just don't think it's doing what it wants to do, which is kind of like I think it's supposed to try and kind of be like a once in a while kind of huge initiation tool. I just don't think they put too much of his power budget into it, and so he's kind of bleh when he doesn't have it, and then if you screw it up, that's a 5-minute cooldown, right? Like there's nothing else. Like, the only other thing that comes close to that is like Flash, right? Like, which is a summoner spell, right? Like, there's no other character who's like, well, I fucked up my ult, so now it's gonna be 5 minutes until I get my big thing again. Type of deal.
That is interesting. I think Corki's biggest problem. I kind of agree with this. I don't think this passive is very good. Like, I feel like this is people have been complaining a lot about the over kind of mini gamesing of League of Legends recently, and I get what they're getting at, but I don't actually know that I agree with that in theory. I think these kind of identity defining games are generally speaking pretty good, but this one might be a misfire because I played with Corki a couple of times. I've never actually played the champion, but I feel like I've never seen somebody use that thing well. You know what I mean? I don't know what using that well looks like. What does a dangerous Corki flying at me with these sirens or whatever actually look like? When am I actually afraid of that? Though I do think it was really good for them to double down on Corki's kind of identity as this magic damage AD carry, and I think that the magic damage AD carry concept is a good it's a good precedent for them to kind of set in a certain position, because I think that in every other role, right, like you can find AD damage where you like there are AD fighters, right, like Alawi, and AP fighters, right, like Rumble, and you have, AD assassins like Zed, and then you have AP assassins like LeBlanc, right? You can kind of go all the way down the line looking for all this stuff, but AD carries are pretty universally AD. There's kind of Azir and Twisted Fate, and as far as I'm concerned, those are kind of the only two that get close to, and Teemo is the third one that I normally think of. That they get close to kind of like marksman levels.
Yeah.
But they also bring magic damage. And so having his dedicated role be in the bottom lane rather than the mid or the top lane, this is a good thing. Because I think it allows the team to go, Alawi top, Jarvan jungle, Yasuo mid, but you're not completely lacking in your magic damage.
No, I absolutely agree. I think that was a good direction for them to take. But again, I think that because they fumbled with the passive, or at least they fumbled in some regards with the passive, I think that makes him a less attractive option. I'd also see them push Ezreal a little bit more in that direction. I think they kind of have, but I think kind of having him be kind of like that other magic marksman, it'd be kind of a neat thing. Like just
interesting. I'd actually like that direction for Ezreal though. I like Ezreal kind of more or less where he is. The big thing I want from Ezreal is I think the base damage on his Q should be lowered, and it should be allowed to crit. And that would be solid with Ezreal, because the way the Q is functionally an auto attack,
right?
Right. It's this skill shot auto attack that you can pop out every couple of seconds. A lot like Yasuo's Q or Gangplank's Parlay, and I think it's just kind of weird that it doesn't crit. And it bugs me that it can't, because it makes crit builds feel kind of subpar on Ezreal because so much of what you're doing is, throwing out these Q auto attacks, and they're not, I don't know, they're not as powerful as they.
No, that's definitely fair. Like I think they could go either way with it, and I think it put Ezreal in a better place than he is at the moment. But again, I think this is kind of speculation.
I feel that.
I'm
a big fan. I'm a big fan of the Kog'Maw changes.
All right,
I'm a big fan of the changes. I mean, playing this new Kog'Maw is so great because, I'm a big Kog'Maw fan. Kog'Maw was one of my very first AD carries. I'm super into this AD carry because, he fits into a play style that I'm very good at, which is, hardcore farm, hyper carry, late game kind of champions, right? Like Karthus was my main season 3 champion. I loved this old Kog'Maw build, kind of season 2, a little bit of season 3 Kog'Maw, which was just, build. You just built Infinity Edge, Fan of Dancer. You got to final build, and then you just wrecked people's shit, right? Like you just fucking ended them, and that all went away when and what Kog'Maw used to have is he had a really high base health, and he had this good poking power on his ultimate to kind of carry him to that point, right? But what people figured out eventually when this happened, I think in season 3 Worlds with Genja, and then it kind of went in full force in season 4, was Trinity Force was so good on Kog'Maw because he could keep getting these. First of all, it was really easy for him to complete his auto attacks because he gets such range, and it's really easy for him to hit these procs because of his ultimate, right? And I hate that build on Kog'Maw. Not because it's bad, right? Like, design-wise, it's fine. There are people who prefer that playstyle. It's good design, whatever, who cares? It's just not the Kog'Maw that I want. It's not my Kog'Maw. And so this change that they've made, which is that, when you activate your W, not only do you get all this range, but you also get you also double your attack speed.
You turn into
you
a machine
double
gun.
The attack speed cap. It's so perfect for me personally. It's like they were like, hey buddy, man, we wanted to fucking make a champion just for you. His name's Kog'Maw, all right? His name's Kog'Maw, and you can play him all the time now, and he's super fun. And so I've played these games, where you play Kog'Maw and you just get dumpstered in lane. You get absolutely fucking destroyed, and they're pushing it on your inhibitor turn at 12 minutes of the game. But it doesn't matter, man. You fucking Kog'Maw, and you're just farming up, and you're getting your items, and you get Blade of the Ruin King, and then you get Rune's Hurricane, and you fucking get Infinity Edge, and then all of a sudden it's pentakill the champion, as long as you have a Janna who's just gonna sit on your side and make sure nobody can actually reach you. It's so good. It's so fun. It is, as far as I'm concerned, it is the most successful of these AD carry reworks, just because they have turned a champion that has fallen out of my favor into this perfect buddy champion again.
Do you think he's overpowered at all?
There's some nerfs coming in for him next patch. I've paid attention a little bit to the PBE where they're getting rid of the AD scaling on his, percent max health damage that comes with the W, which I think, it's kind of like a nothing nerf. I just don't think that it's a super big deal, because the scaling wasn't even really that great. It's 1% per 150 AD, right? So it's 2% at final build. I could kind of take it or leave it, right? I think he's gonna be really, really, really strong in the right comps and against the wrong comps, right? If you don't have a good kill the fucking Kog'Maw comp, you're gonna get absolutely destroyed. I think you could 100% see this in LCS play if somebody's play, if you're playing
the famous protect the Kog'Maw comps type
exactly, right? The protect the Kog'Maw comp got real now, right? It'll be good if you're playing the wrong shit into it, but he's still vulnerable, right? You can't kite on Kog'Maw because the attack speed cap, you get so much attack speed that you're either giving up your biggest asset, which is all this attack speed that you're going to get for free, or you're just going to get blown up if you're up against kind of the wrong comp. But I've played Kog'Maw into these wrong comps in Blind Pick where you're up against J4 Talon and a Mumu or whatever, and you're just well, we're fucked, boys.
Yeah.
But then you play him against somebody like Darius, and he just has a field day because it's oh, we're playing Nami Kog'Maw against a Darius Oriana, I don't know, Skarner, right? These guys that have to run up to you. I could just blow up Darius before he ever gets close enough to pull me. So it's, and I think that's good design, right? Like fundamentally, League should look for that design. It should be about that design. And what I really want to see from League is more of that design, where you find a super powerful strategic niche, and you say this character is good in the right strategic situation, right? Like if you want to win a game of League of Legends with this character, you have to play in this way. And I think that's good design for the game. That's what makes it strategically interesting.
I think I agree with that to a certain extent. I think you still need some flexibility there, but I think there's enough there. I'm not saying that there isn't.
Right.
So
but I
now that
imagine
we've talked about your
favorite. I'm just gonna guess. I'm gonna peer to my fucking crystal ball, right? Like I'm just gonna look into. Could it be Graves?
Oh yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Oh, great. Like, in the same way that you're like, oh, man, I love this kind of Pharma Piper carry. It's like, I can play an ADC, like, retarded like a fighter like I usually do, and it won't be terrible?
That AD carry, right?
Oh, man. It's like, I have played Graves in every position except for support this season, and I have not been disappointed.
That is interesting.
Like,
I actually think, so, I like the Graves design, but, I don't really know that I don't think he's very well balanced. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
What do you mean? Like,
this is going to be endemic because I know a little bit of the development history. Obviously, Graves was picked up by Certainly T, who is the champion designer. Besides such overpowered on release favorites as Zed and Yasuo and perpetually nerfed champions like Thresh, right? He's one of these guys who I really enjoy. Certainly T. I think and Callista, is another. I love him because he's a think outside the box designer, right? If you look at any one of these champions, right, you can just like ID, right? Like, oh, holy fucking shit, right? Like, oh. You've got people like Zyra who make these plants, and it's a really kind of interesting system that we've never really seen before. Yorick doesn't count because he's a terrible champion. You've got Yasuo.
Yorick is certainly unique, right? Like he might be a bad kind of force for the game.
I know. I'm just.
No. But like I think your point, like I think it supports your point, right? Like Yorick's one of the more unique champions in the game. He might be terrible at the moment in terms of like, the kind of...
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I agree with you.
Like, who would have thought of an ADC with ammunition, right? Like,
Yeah. And I think that, you've got this... you've got this kind of tough balancing act between this gimmick almost, right? Like, Yasuo can only hit his ult when somebody hits up a knock-up, and so, certain Yasuo comps are way easier than others, right? With Zed, you always have to be keeping track of these shadows. Callista can, pull an entire character in a completely different way, right? Like, these big fundamental kind of mechanics redesigns almost that he's really thinking outside of the box, but it makes it so fucking tough to balance for, in a way that, Jinx... Look, Gypsy Lord is the guy that designed Jinx. He's a good designer. He's made some good champions, some shit champions, whatever, right? But at the end of the day, it's pretty straightforward when Jinx is powerful and when she's not powerful, because she falls into the convention of AD carries, when she has her, all of these things that we can expect and quantify, and there's nothing really crazy and out there. But like, man, when you tell me that Mordekaiser's role is, he also redid Mordekaiser, by the way. When you tell me that Mordekaiser's role is all of a sudden going to be a bottom lane AP bruiser who replaces the AD carry, right? Like, that's just such a huge outside of the box idea that it's almost impossible to balance it out of the gate. And
certainly T redid Mordekaiser.
Yeah. The first time, and then they handed off to another designer for his very recent kind of like, it wasn't quite a rework, but it was just like a little retooling.
To kind of bring it in, make it more consistent. Yeah, like that triple damage Q was cool. But it was also, like, very much like, I got two charges, flash and bam.
And it's one of those things where you can totally tell, certainly T was like, all right, guys, it's my fucking Mordekaiser pitch. He gets a fucking dragon, right? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
He's that kind of guy where he just, like, must walk into these meetings and just, like, pull his dick out and put it on the fucking table, right? Like, I've got an idea. It's this champion who has a dash on a 0.1 second cooldown, right? Like... he's the guy that would have thought of that. I think Yasuo's my favorite champion in the game. I think he's amazing. Yasuo's a perfect fucking champion. I love this champion so much, right?
I think he's overpowered and a bullshit champion.
I know plenty of people who believe that, and they're all universally wrong.
They're all universally haters.
Yeah, they're all universally haters of weebs like me. Anyway, I think Graves suffers from the same thing, right? This ammo system, this cone auto attack, all of this stuff is so out there that, hey, man, I'm willing to give it a couple of patches. You take your time with that shit, certainly, T, man. It's going to be overpowered at first, but we'll bring it in line.
I don't think it's super overpowered right now. I think it does a good job of being like, well, you have to be kind of exposed, because if, they're behind any sort of creep line at all, you can't actually get to the champions. And I think it's kind of like, well, if you go ham, right, like you can get that extra damage, but it leaves you super vulnerable. And I think that's... at least in the way maybe I just play him too ham, and maybe he's too good if you play him at max range. But I think that's a good kind of target to aim for, right? The kind of like, you have to go, if you want to be super effective, you have to go in, and that leaves you vulnerable, and you have to kind of build him a little bit tankier than your traditional ADC. And I think it's a kind of a good way to go with him, and I'm playing him like that, so maybe that's why I feel like it's balanced.
I think the big problem is I definitely think that there's a space for a dedicated AD carry version of Graves. That has a 425 range and does this cone auto attack kind of thing and everything like that. It has the ammo system. But I don't think that I think a Graves in top lane who does that that's tough. A Graves in mid lane who does that, that's tough. A Graves in the jungle who does that, that's tough. And I feel like, some of the changes that we've seen are changes that, kind of screw up almost his bottom lane more than it does those other lanes. And, something I really do want to see from Graves, like I do think he should, I want him to be a bottom lane character, right? Like I want him to be a bottom lane champion who stays down there. But I'm afraid that the more retooling that they do, the more tuning that to bring him kind of in line or whatever, they're going to force him out of the bottom lane and into the jungle or mid lane or top lane, where he's kind of found these alternate homes because his kit is a little bit more along those lines.
So I feel you. I definitely agree that I would like to see his primary role in the bottom lane, and I think that you can. I'm not exactly sure how, like, I'm not exactly sure how you do it, but I think you can, I think you focus on that, and if he's viable in the other lanes, and he's not too oppressive there, I think that's fine. But and specifically for the jungle, I don't think that's the worst thing. I think having an option that isn't Kindred for, you have your Kindred, and you have, your kind of, it used to be kind of top lane Quinn. I'm not actually super up to date on how people are actually playing Quinn right now. I think they're playing her in the jungle too, ironically.
Yeah, they play her everywhere but bottom lane, basically.
Yeah.
Which is actually fine. I actually think Quinn is very well designed for that, in my opinion.
I think kind of having these options for when, say, you have a Mordekaiser in your bottom lane, I think that makes these kind of ideas okay. I don't think that they're too bad for that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And to a certain extent, I would like to see, for instance, I think gearing Lucian to be a mid lane champion would actually be pretty good for him. I think he would probably. I'm pretty sure I could take Lucian mid lane and do just fine. But I used to do a lot of mid lane Tristana because one of the defining aspects of mid lane is wave clear, right? And being able to wave clear efficiently, and a lot of a lot of AD carries can't do that. But you could put somebody like Tristana mid, and she'll do just fine wave clearing. You can put somebody like Ezreal mid, and he'll do just fine, and he'll really scale up in kind of a good way. I definitely do think that should be opened up, but I'm really afraid of this kind of not quite melee, not quite ranged thing. I think that's good in a duo lane, right? That's something you can control for in a duo lane, but it's something that's tougher to control for in the ridiculous variety of top lane, right?
Sure,
because
I see that.
The starkness of playing Darius into, even conventional top lane champions like, Teemo, is ridiculous when compared to playing Darius against Olaf, right? An all melee champion, and I think that it's something I'm very wary of in general.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I think that I think there are ways to tune that, like maybe like I think like something like having the cone fall off in damage or something, or like making the bullet spread a little bit wider. That way, you have to get in closer to kind of be maximally effective.
Yeah,
I think that kind of thing doesn't actually hurt him in, say, the jungle, where he's kind of in a weird place anyway, because like he doesn't have a lot of CC, and so I don't think he's as an effective a ganker as you'd want him to be kind of like a mainline jungler. But I think having him as kind of like a pocket jungler is okay, something like that. But I think that Graves can be put into a good place, and I don't think that I'm not particularly worried about it.
Cool. So we talked a little bit about Quinn. Have you played any Quinn?
I have played zero Quinn.
Oh, cool. Well, me neither. But I've seen a lot of Quinn. I think she's overtuned right now, and there are probably going to be some nerfs coming her way. But I really, really, really am for this change because it does fulfill what I think Quinn should always have been, which is kind of a mid lane AD carry. I don't actually like top lane Quinn. I think top lane Quinn is pretty oppressive. But mid lane Quinn I think is a good spot for her to be in. And we're seeing a lot of Quinn these days. I think this ult change is kind of crazy. It's worse than I thought. It's I really thought it was going to be I thought it was going to be stronger, but I guess just obviously it's so easy to activate or whatever that the movement speed isn't as much as I thought, and the damage from that Sky Strike isn't as much as I thought. I don't know. I don't know.
I think it's interesting because it kind of like I've seen it used very effectively as a chasing tool, and I think that's that's a neat place to be. Like I think it's a unique thing to do. I can't really speak to the balance of it because I'm. Like I said, I haven't seen it enough to really talk to that. But I think it's kind of neat that you can be like, oh, I'm going to go hide in the corner for 3 seconds so I can go, like, fucking run that guy down.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think it's, I don't know. It's, it's something that I have to go deeper on to figure out more.
Yeah. And we're kind of running into our time limit here. Do you have any quick thoughts about Caitlyn and Misfortune, and then maybe?
I really love Caitlyn. Oh my god, Caitlyn's so good right now. Caitlyn used to be very good at what she does now, but they've just really, they've kind of taken the, it's like she got upgraded from like RC, like shitty Pathmark brand, like RC Cola or like like their Coca-Cola knockoff, to straight up regular Coke. You know what I mean? It's the same. Right? It's just a better version of the same. The charge system on her traps. Oh, beautiful.
Oh, see, that's not the thing that really... That's not what we get. It's me hot and bothered. I think that, like, her identity as kind of the sniper is just kind of really enhanced by these kind of, like... you can call it minigames. These ways to kind of, like, make those headshots really, like, kind of like, ping. And these kind of, like... she feels like before she felt kind of like a generic, like sniper in like the sniper character. Now she feels like, Caitlyn, the champion in League of Legends, and I think that's I think they've really formed out of her identity. Well,
I really enjoy. I something that I never really appreciated was. I always thought of the net as an escape ability, right? And I think that's always what it was kind of intended for, right? But using your net offensively now feels great. I've gotten plenty of first bloods because, you offensively net into somebody, you hit them with the EQ combo still works, obviously, and then you smack them in the face for, a 250 damage headshot at that level 2 or whatever. And it's just like, man, I love this champion. I love this redesign. I've played Misfortune. Misfortune is okay. I hear tell she's overpowered. People tell me that she's very, very strong, and I do agree with them to a certain extent. This new passive is very, very strange, where you have to keep attacking a new target in order to get this bonus damage, and where she used to have an attack speed steroid. This new attack speed steroid will as you auto attack. So it gives you a bunch of attack speed, right? But as you keep triggering your passive, right, each time you attack a new champion, you actually up your duration on this. You up your duration on this attack speed steroid, which is interesting gameplay, and I'm not quite sure whether or not I like it yet. Because I've played it, I've played it where I can keep it up for. I've like kept it up for like a minute, just like sitting in lane. I activate this strut for 30 mana or whatever, and then I just keep attacking new stuff, and it always exceed. It feels like it's just on forever compared to what it used to be. I don't know how I feel about it. She's interesting.
All right, well, I think we'll leave it at that. We probably have some more thoughts for, say, like the Rift Herald, and some other stuff at the beginning of next cast and the masteries. I don't want to rush those.
I promise I'm not going to talk about Fallout 4 next cast, guys. You have my solemn vow that we're not talking about Fallout 4 next episode.
Okay, awesome.
Mostly because next episode is going to be a Pathfinder episode.
But yeah, so that's been our overview of most of the ADC and vision changes in the preseason. Tune in next time for some stuff that we'll talk about. They'll probably have something to do with games. Probably won't have anything to do with, say, Donald Trump. Until then, you can watch us play Pathfinder on twitch.tv/SomeDerpsPlayGames. You can email us if you think that we're wrong or we're right or other things. You can email us what you think of Donald Trump. We probably won't care.
That's not true. I care a lot about our listeners. You can email me about whatever you want. I'll care about it because I care about you. Listeners.
All right. Buddy cares about your thoughts about Donald Trump. Feel free to email him about Donald Trump. You can email us at somederpsplaygames@gmail.com. Links will be in the description on the SoundCloud. Feel free to comment on the SoundCloud. And until next time, this has been some Derps talk about games, rather. Goodbye, dear listeners.
Goodbye, dear listeners.